you very much. Welcome everyone. We're gonna call this meeting to order now. It is 6:35 p.m. on January 26, 2023. And this is a public meeting of the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission. If the Spanish language interpreters, Gaby or Luisa, can please give the information on the Spanish language interpretation? And for some reason, we cannot hear. Can any of you can just give the information in Spanish or read the slide, or you want me to, I can do it too. Okay, yes, I will do it. Buenas noches a todos. Este es una junta pública sujeta a la ley de Oregon y a la ciudad y a las reglas administrativas de la ciudad de Portland y va a ser grabada. El lenguaje en español, la interpretación está disponible para esta junta. Cuando ustedes quieran tener acceso al lenguaje en español, por favor, vean su video feed de las personas que están hablando y el audio feed cuando se reemplace con las voces de los intérpretes. Para tener acceso a esto, por favor, haga un clic donde dice lenguaje e interpretación en la junta de Zoom, en los controles que están en la junta de Zoom, abajo de su pantalla y seleccione español. Thank you. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Andrea and Aaron. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. The closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. But please note that this is an automatic captioning service and is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to the City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon State Law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom Q&A feature. As the commissioners are presenting or discussing things, if attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings and agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and the answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. And now I will pass it to the co-chairs for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Victoria. We acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize the undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past and working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationships to these lands and waters.
Thank you, Co-Chair Tirsa. Now we're gonna review our community's agreements prior to our conversations. And as we do in every meeting, we will have time for each individual to read and then pass to the other 2 pages. There are 3 different pages. Thank you. Next page, please. Thank you. Now, I would like to ask everyone,
Ahora me gustaría preguntarles a todos
do we all
si todos estamos de acuerdo
following the
de
community's
cometer, o sea,
agreements for today's meeting and to gently calling in our college if and collaborators if needed. And if I can have, yes, your hand or your thumbs up. Thank you very much. Okay, now I will pass it to the co-chairs to discuss timeline and other important topics. Thank you.
Thank you. This meeting is a part of the Police Accountability Commission's powers and duties phase of work, which focuses on the functions of the new system. Future phases of work will develop the form of the new system, as well as how it relates to the rest of city government and the transition plan from our current system to the new one. The Commission will present all proposed changes to the City Council in 2023 for their consideration and approval. This slide that we're on now shows the outcome documents of the powers and duties phase. Based on the agenda and scope approved by the Commission, we'll hear from subcommittee We'll hear from the subcommittee on officer accountability in a moment about the subcommittee's progress towards referring a draft document to the full PAC. The 2 other subcommittees have developed and referred their documents to the full Commission, which we will be covering access to information today specifically, and hopefully structural oversight. And this side is the current project plan for the powers and duties phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. It will be updated as needed throughout this phase of work, getting to the end of that now, so hopefully not too many more updates. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the Commission gets from now through to the end of the phase, which again, getting closer to the end now, when this focuses on identifying areas of agreement among Commission members as to the functions of the new system. Today's meeting is part of the blue box that is highlighted with a red border in the upper right corner of the screen. Following today, these are going to be the next meetings of the PAC, of the Police Accountability Commission, excuse me. Specifically, we'd like to highlight the Subcommittee on Officer Accountability, which is meeting at 6:30 on this coming Monday, January 30th. The commission is also planning a community listening session, the second half of the two-part Q&A that we've been doing this month. So hopefully some commission members who can't normally come to those can come to that one, or can't come to the full in-person ones. And the full commission will meet again at 6:30 p.m. either next Thursday, February 2nd, or Monday, February 6th. That it depends a little bit on our work today and the access to information document specifically. Thank you. Sorry, I did not realize I was on this one as well. Today's meeting agenda includes working through the draft areas of agreement, like I was mentioning earlier, flagging items for further discussion after section A, which we already completed, resolving items, and if possible, approving the final document. Hopefully we can get to that as the Police Accountability Commission's area of agreement on access to information. All document approval processes include a review of the Police Accountability Commission's values and goals, and hearing public comment on the specific document, which we're all well familiar with at this point. Following this, the Subcommittee on Structural Oversight will present the draft areas of agreement on their subcommittee, and the Commission will hold a discussion on this, if possible, approving the final document. We'll see if we get to that, but hopefully we have some time set aside at the end for at least an overview of the document. So approve. It isn't expected that that's what I was just about to say. I'm reading the notes, and we'll have a pass there at the end. Yeah. Which is a county and independent judgment refresher. There are also some phase of work and conversations and an open public comment period on the agenda, as well as subcommittee reports.
Thank you, Co-Chair Christian. We're gonna move to the next item on the agenda, and we'll now move to hearing reports for two subcommittees, and then from the staff on community engagement. I will now pass it to the co-chair, Charlie and Dan, to discuss the subcommittee on officer accountability.
Thank you, Facilitator Lara. My co-chair, Charlie Michelle Wesley, is not here tonight. She may show up later, but we're not sure about that. So I'm going to give this report right now. So our subcommittee had a marathon 4-hour meeting on Saturday, and thank you to everybody who made it through that. I think we did a really good job. We got through the end of section, so they have 6 sections, A, B, C, D, E, and F. And we got through the end of section B and all of section C and all of section D. We have a lot of things that we have set aside for further discussion. So we have to get through E and F. We have been assigned the time slot on Monday, this coming Monday at 6:30 to get through as much of that as we can. But then we still have to format it and go back through the beginning from beginning to end to make sure we have everything ready to send to you all for your approval. So we're hoping that maybe we'll get through the access to information tonight so that we can also have next Thursday's meeting to finish that up. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner and Co-Chair Dan. Now we're gonna pass to the next, going to start discussing. Okay, let me see the agenda because, okay. Yes, now is go to slide 14, and we're now going to start discussing the draft PAC areas of agreement on access to information. We will now move into discussing the draft areas of agreement to access to the information. And we ask to follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak. Even though you can speak multiple times, please be facilitator and remember that we are now using a weighted start in our discussions. Finally, please be forward-looking in your comments. Will the co-chairs like to get the discussion started?
Sure, thank you. This is Obi Goju. We'll just head straight into the document. We completed like the intro section as well as compelling testimony or compelling and volunteered testimony. We're moving on to subpoena power, which is section B. And thank you, staff, for scrolling. So subpoena power, I'm just gonna go ahead and, like we did beforehand, we'll read the bold text, maybe talk a little bit, and then see if we agree. So B1, the Oversight Board shall have the authority to issue subpoenas for the purpose of compelling witness testimony to fully and thoroughly investigate a complaint or conduct a review.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Are any discussion or suggestions? And this B1? Okay, can we move on? Okay, thank you. We can move on.
All right, my turn. Again, this is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I didn't say that before. And I'm co-chair of this subcommittee as well. So B2 says the board shall have the authority to issue subpoenas, I think there's supposed to be an S there, for the testimony and the production of records, including and not limited to video recordings, audio reports, and all evidence pertinent to an investigation.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Are there any suggestions or discussion about B2? Can we move on? Okay.
B3, the Oversight Board, comma, with the assistance of legal counsel, comma, shall have the authority to subpoena witnesses, administer oaths, and require the production of evidence. Through legal counsel, the board shall apply to Multnomah County Courthouse or to the appropriate court for the enforcement of a subpoena or to impose the penalties for failure to obey a subpoena or order.
Okay, are there any proposed changes or suggestions to B3? Discussion? Okay. Can we move on?
Can I just say a quick
Sure,
statement?
go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad we agreed to this. It's like, one thing we want to discuss is that this new board probably doesn't want to in any way hinder or stop people from participating in in conducting the reviews and complaints. So the term shall have kind of means something, like it's not like they're going to forcefully do this all the time. It's just have the ability to. I just wanted to say that, not to add extra teeth to this sort of document, but thank you.
Thank you. If I understand correctly, you wanna suggest to change?
Oh, no, I don't want to change. I just want to make sure that people
No changes,
understand.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, thank you. Okay. Do you have any suggestions besides this? No? Okay, I'm confused. We moved to B4, correct? And now we're giving me B4. Okay.
B4, I got somebody with sirens outside my window. So B4, in general, initial efforts to compel officer testimony shall be made through the administrative process. At its discretion, the Oversight Board can subpoena a sworn bureau member.
Okay.
This was some compromise language. Just as a reminder, this is some compromise language we came up with over this issue.
Well, thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Then let me ask, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Oh, Commissioner Monica, do you have a question or comment?
I just wanted to ask Commissioner Dan to just give us a very short explanation as to why this was something that we discussed for a very, very long time, and what we came up with was this. And I just want everyone to understand, I think it's a pretty important point for all of us to really understand.
Dan, do you want to do it? Do you want me to be the neutral party?
Sure, that's a good idea. Go ahead.
I'll give it a first shot at it. At the best, or at the normal process for this is the administrative process that we were talking about beforehand. And in which compelling officer testimony through an administrative process is what in best cases would be done, because that has all the legal protections for both the officer and for the oversight board. And there's no jumping into any other realm other than the administrative portion that we're trying to write the rules for. Now, when you bring in the term subpoena, subpoenaing will involve using the court system, which every person has the right to the Fifth Amendment, or basically to not self-incriminate. So using the subpoena, they could just say, well, I'm not going to respond to that. And that is one section, versus having the administrative section in which the people's supervisors, and the mayor, police chief, whoever we end up designated later on, can say you have to, your testimony has to be compelled and you have to respond, or you could face administrative punishment up to being fired. So that is why in best case, you'd want to use the compelling testimony portion, or volunteer testimony, of course. And then if need be, the actual subpoenaing of a sworn bureau member would be done as a last ditch effort or a compromise. Now, it doesn't necessarily pertain to subpoenaing bureau records, which I think is a point of discussion, but that's kind of how we got up to this language. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
I just
go
want to
ahead.
add one, because this came from, Commissioner Glenn was concerned about this and raised a possibility that an officer might not respond to the compelled testimony and recognize what the consequences would be of that, but they might want to, for whatever own personal reasons are, be compelled by the court to testify. So that gives us that option, or the board that option, if that's the case. So I was persuaded by Commissioner Glenn's discussion of why she wanted to have that language in there.
Thank you, Coach Jordan. Is there any additional comments or questions? No, then I'm gonna move to ask, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the new proposed changes? Okay, is there a general agreement to change it for what it was as the proposed changes from before? Okay, thank you. Then we can move on.
Thank you guys, and thanks, Monica, for bringing that up. I'm glad we discussed that. So continuing on, the Oversight Board shall maintain the confidentiality of any confidential records to remain as transparent as possible. Records available to the public, records available in the public sphere shall be openly accessible. All members of the Oversight Board shall not disclose confidential or legally privileged information or records, and shall be subject to the same penalties as the legal custodian of the information or records for any unlawful or unauthorized disclosure.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is there discussions or questions or notes about B5? No. Go ahead, Co-Chair Dan.
The part that the staff is playing with are, one is just a commentary that's not necessary for our finished document. The other one is basically going to be converted to a footnote for a decision that we made at the beginning of the last meeting. I don't remember if we remember to say that at the beginning, but we agreed that all the footnotes would just be put into footnotes unless anybody has a huge objection as we're going along. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Co-Chair. And staff?
Yeah, just to clarify, so the decision at the beginning of the consideration of this document by the full commission last Thursday was to move all the footnotes that are solely references, all the proposals that the co-chairs made to make into footnotes that are solely references, and just kind of blanket omnibus approval of that was made by the commission. So I just separated the comment out here because this is purely a reference. And this, as you know, is not specifically a reference, so it is a separate proposal that facilitator Laura, if we could, there's a proposal to move that to the footnote that would need to be decided separately
Okay.
right now, after, of course, other comments.
Yes, thank you. Then I will ask the question twice. But before that, I will pass it to co-chair Ati.
Hi, so for the first two sentences, especially like the first one, it just, I mean, it seems so like redundant, you know, that I'm wondering if it might just almost make sense to have that the PAC agrees that the oversight board, like that sentence, except as like the oversight board should maintain confidentiality, we're required to do so, and support transparency where available, rather than saying like we have to maintain the confidentiality of confidential records, because that's kind of implied in the term confidential, right? So yeah, I was just thinking the first two sentences, yeah, they just seem very redundant, and that first sentence there kind of perfectly encapsulates you know, what those two sentences say.
Thank you, co-chair Ati. Okay, then I will ask the three different questions for B5, unless there's more discussion or questions. So yeah, co-chair Dan?
It just that changes the shall to a should, so I think we should put shall back in that first sentence there, so oversight board shall.
Okay. Co-chair Ajay will not comment?
Yeah, was just about to say that. And also, I don't know if we need like the PAC agrees, because in theory, we agree about, you know, all of this, right? We're all going to come to some kind of consensus. So just having like the oversight board shall maintain, etc. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, then if there are no additional questions, I'm gonna ask 3 times for B5 to approve B5. The first one is B5, the changes that co-chair Ajay suggests. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? We're talking about the first sentence on B5. Okay, is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to what is right now? Thank you. Then we move to the second part of B5. We can see
Actually,
it. Yes.
this change included essentially moving this up and rewording, and this part was already resolved.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's it.
Then can we move on to B6? Thank you. Then let's move on to B6.
I can take this one too. B6, any person who fails to comply with a subpoena may be subject to contempt proceedings as prescribed by state law, provided that such persons shall not be required to answer any question or act in violation of rights under the constitutions of the state or of the United States.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is there questions or comments about B6? Yes, Co-Chair Dan?
Oh, well, so and then that sentence that's read, we were planning to add that to this subsection as well.
Okay.
So it should say the board may take into consideration the repercussions of a contempt finding after a person refuses to cooperate. And that's kind of to address the issue that was raised in a side note above, that, you know, it's not the intention of this commission to have the board putting people in the position of getting put in jail for failing to cooperate with the investigators. We just want to make sure that that's listed in there as a you know, statement of purpose or statement of intent.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Okay, then now we ask, is there a strong opposition to change or add that phrase at the bottom of B6? Is there a general agreement to add in the statement at the bottom of B6? Thank you. Then we can move on. Oh, Commissioner Connie? Oh, you were agreeing, sorry. Okay, we can move on. Oh, we finished B. Yay.
Can we move on?
We can move on. Can we move on to C? Yes.
Right, I just want to see if there's a consensus to move on, because we agreed to change that, but we didn't accept the, okay.
You're right, Co-Chair Dan. Yes, can we move on to C now? Yeah, thank you. Now we can start C.
Okay, I guess I messed up. It's my turn again, I guess. So C1, the Oversight Board should have direct access to all Bureau information and records, including confidential and legally privileged information. And this is the heading of access to police records. And then a lot of the rest of this is just commentary and footnotes information.
Thank you. Is there a questions or suggestions on C1? Okay, yes, Commissioner Fate.
Yeah, just changing that tense to shall, should, shall have.
Thank you. Are there additional changes to C1?
I don't have changes. I just want to make sure that people look at the language that exists in this current city code talks specifically about not having to pay a fee for any of the records. And so that, this proposal should probably include that the existing language. So if you just want to read that to yourselves to make sure that that's reflective of what we're trying to get at.
Okay, thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Then I will ask the question, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to change it from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on to C2? Yes, Commissioner Catherine?
So I just looking at what is currently in the code, I wonder if we need something around that the board can access this information but agrees to maintain, take steps to avoid waiver of the privilege as to third parties. Because that is actually a pretty significant piece there. So that we get access to the privileged information, but we agree that that access does not mean that the privilege is waived as to anybody else. It's basically we're allowed to see it, but our being able to see it does not destroy the privilege. If it does destroy the privilege, then I think there would be a fight about us trying to get that information. I don't know if that makes sense to people.
And how are suggested to change the language or to add something to this statement?
So I think you could just take that and legally privileged information so long as the board takes steps to ensure that the privilege is not waived as to third parties. Yeah, that would work.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Catherine.
Or maybe we could just say, so long as the board ensures that. I think that might be more direct. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there additional comments or questions about this suggestion? No? Okay, yeah, Co-Chair Dan?
Sorry, I couldn't raise my hand for some reason. Yes, this is addressed a little bit in section D also. If you scroll down to, not you, staff, you, Commissioner McDowell, scroll down to D3 and D4, it sort of addresses the custodian question a little bit there. So, but I'm not objecting to what you're suggesting. I'm just saying that it's also addressed in that section D.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask about that C1, and I will ask, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the new proposed changes? And I'm gonna, for the video, when I asked you about, is there a general agreement, we will need to keep our hands a little longer. That way the video captures it. Okay, thank you. Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to as it is now? Thank you. Can we move on to C2? Thank you.
All right, C2. In performing their duties, the board shall have access to Bureau data and records, including but not limited to raw data, tabulated summary statistics, other source materials, and any other format source necessary for the board to perform its duties. The Oversight Board shall have direct access to the original database sources as permitted by state and federal law.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is there any suggestions or discussion about C2? Can we move on to C3? Thank you.
All right, C3. For the improvement of both the efficiency of the Oversight Board as well as the Police Bureau, direct access should be available to the board and its staff in situations where the Bureau is the custodian of the records. This includes but is not limited to, recognizing this includes but not limited to, so there could be a broader list than this. Police reports, A, police reports, B, digital information management systems, which are known as DIMS, or they say DIMS, I don't. C, Versaterm computer aided dispatch, which is a VCAD or VCAD. I don't like reading those acronyms that way, or other future CAD systems. D is after action reports. E is training records. F is global positioning system or GPS data. So you don't say GPUS, do you? Okay, GPS data. And G, discipline and complaint history of individual officers. So that's the proposal for C3.
Is there any suggestions or questions about C3? Can we move on to C4? Thank you.
C4, and yeah, if you noted that staff just wrote, they're kind of a similar idea. C4, to the extent of state and federal law, the Oversight Board shall have direct access to all relevant database networks to which the Bureau subscribes. This includes, but is not limited to, Regional Justice Information System, which said as region, and B, Criminal Justice Information Systems, also called CJIS. Just one point to this, so that's the bold text, just one point. These are a bit broader than the Portland systems listed above. So it's more based on like being ruled by like the FBI as well as, or more Oregon State the kind of police systems. So these are kind of things that I believe the PBB or like local police organizations subscribe to. I think to be a bit forward-looking on this, part of what will define the board in the future will, and when it comes to board membership, when we decide later on, might limit or not limit how much access you can have to them, or which individuals can have access to it. So this is something that even if we all agree, we'll need to look back on in the future when dealing like who was on the board and what it takes to be on the future board. So thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Commissioner Catherine?
Thank you. I wonder, is the first clause of that sentence, the first sentence supposed to, is it trying to get at to the extent allowable under state and federal law? Is that the intent of that clause?
Yes, that is.
Okay, so I guess I would suggest that edit to the extent allowable under. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Co-Chair Dan?
So just to continue a little bit after what my co-chair said, it is possible that if we're asking for this for the actual board, which are the community members, that they might not be allowed to access this depending on how their criminal background check turns out. This might be something that's just for the staff, but it's something, again, we have to discuss in the next phase. And also, Co-Chair Oju, you said You said the oversight board shall have direct access. It says should on the paper. Did you mean to say shall? Did we mean to say shall?
Oh, I think we probably, yeah, I think we probably meant to say shall for now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Dan, Commissioner Obi. Okay, I will ask the question. Is there no more discussion? Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on for the next one? Thank you. Let's go to C5.
Dan, I think it's you.
I was trying to figure out whether we should make a request to leave the full screen up until we're done saying, is it okay to move on? Because I couldn't see everybody's hands. All right, C5, Bureau responses to public records requests shall prioritize the Oversight Board's requests above all other similar requests and should respond within 5 business days with either records or a notice of why records have not been sent. And we propose to cut the word over. And then the thought to that is that in the event that requests for records or other evidence are not complied with, the Oversight Board may issue a subpoena.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Is there any, besides the removal you propose, is there any other discussion, changes, or question about C5? Yes, Commissioner Catherine?
So I wonder, I mean, I sort of hate to put our requests in the category of public records requests, because I feel like we have a greater right to access than the public does under the public records law. So I wonder whether we could just restructure the sentence and just say that the Bureau shall prioritize the Oversight Board's request over other, over pending public records requests or something like that. I guess I'm sensitive to suggesting that the Bureau, that the board's request would be considered public records requests, because I think that they're really kind of I think the board has greater access than the public does. So that's why I want to make that distinction.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Co-Chair Obi?
Yes, those are fantastic points, Catherine. Thank you for making them. And we generally agree. Currently, IPR has to get records. They do it in a similar way to the public. And sometimes it is quick and things get back to them quickly. And other times it said it takes weeks. In the system kind of written, like since just if you look at the numbering, like our first thing say, the new board should have direct access to these records, or to most of the things they need. So hopefully, and they're currently working on it now, hopefully this is almost a redundant thing that's not a problem. But if there is some sort of specific thing that the board cannot have access to for some reason and needs to be done in a request form, we'd want to make sure it's expedited in a certain way. And to changing the language, the last point, changing the language, I agree with that, saying like, the work of the new board should be treated differently than public records requests, even if it is a similar mechanism in this one small avenue. But I don't mind changing the language at all. I think that's a good point you bring up and a good idea.
So I think we would want to change that first sentence where we would just say the Bureau shall prioritize. So the Bureau shall prioritize, and then you could go to the Oversight Board's request. Then you can just X the rest out over. So does it make sense? So no, that piece I think you would want to keep. It's that piece goes. Does that make sense? The board shall prioritize the oversight board's request over pending public records requests and should respond, blah, blah. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. This is the change, but we also have, yeah, Co-Chair Dan.
Right, well, I'm not sure why that got highlighted in yellow, but I think above all other similar requests is being proposed to be cut, is my understanding.
And also you're suggesting we cut over, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I'm gonna ask the question then when we take, okay, we have to do 2 questions. The first question, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? And the first part. Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Then I'm gonna ask for taking the word over out. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change to take over out? Is there general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. We will remove over. Can we move on to C6? Okay, thank you.
Okay. For records, or sorry, C6. For records accessed within the Portland Police Bureau system, the Oversight Board should not be required to submit a fee.
Okay. Is there any suggestions, question about C6? Yes, Co-Chair Obi?
I guess we could change the language to say shall, instead of should not be required, and like the passive tense, it should be shall not, no fee shall be required, or some way of being more sort of more in tune with the rest of the language.
Thank you. Any additional questions or suggestions? Okay. Let me ask the question then. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed changes, or use shall? Is there general agreement from changing from what it was and put in the word shall? Thank you. Can we move to the next? Okay, let's move to C7.
All right, my turn. C7, the city shall ensure a discrete source of adequate funding in addition to that required for Oversight Board operations to fully pay for any fees the Oversight Board incurs when accessing information from a non-PPP source. So in other words, if they got to go to another agency and pay a fee, which, we don't have control over that. And then the part that's highlighted by staff, again, is just a commentary. It's just repeating what we agree with. And I think that was just there as a commentary. I don't know that we need to leave this in the document even. So, C7.
Thank you, Coach Dan. Are you suggesting that if the PAC agrees is removed until the city?
Well, it's hard for me to see the commentary on the right there, but yes, I think I was proposing to cut the whole commentary because I don't think it's necessary.
The whole commentary, okay. The notes say that remove it from the PAC agrees that the principle that the oversight board should not have to submit a fee or use any of this budget to access police records is broader than only records accessed within the Portland Police Bureau system. And that was the
Oh, I see. Okay. I agree with myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can leave that other, and which is it's basically supporting this idea under the principles of the charter that they supposed to be able to engage with their independent judgment. So we probably want to put a footnote in there about that section about independent judgment, which I think is 2-1007.
Okay. Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. And Co-Chair Ajay, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I have a question. So seeing that phrase non-PPB source, Dan kind of alluded to, Commissioner Dan, like alluded to, it's being other police departments. But I was curious, like, if there's any other context in which this would apply, you know, like a media source, or like, I was just wondering, yeah, like how broad could that be? And is there, if anyone knows of any instances where there was payment to non-police, or is this really supposed to be governmental, just non-local governmental? I don't know if that's a clear question, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to ask.
Thank
Well,
you.
it's a clear question. I don't know the answer to it. I mean, I've been monitoring this whole system for 30 years, and I've never seen the existing system or the previous one say we had to pay money to get access to this piece of information. So it's possible that it's happened. You know, there may be some limitations to it too, like if somebody demands some huge fee to get access to video that is needed for an investigation. It may be one of those things where they want to use the subpoena instead. Yeah, I don't know. Co-Chair?
Yeah, no, I penned this text because it was just one of those ideas when the IPR came and talked to us, saying like, oh no, there's no fee to what we do with the Portland Police Bureau, which I mean that's a great start. But then, you know, sometimes these investigations move further. I meant it more in a governmental way, but I do absolutely see your point, Commissioner Jay, that it could be much deeper than that. You know, this wasn't the. I think I told staff and I told Commissioner Dan that this line to me could just be not put in and resolved later as one of those issues. But I see a discussion, and I think it's just something that the bottom text to it, or the subtext, saying that we agree that it should be independent judgment and that you know, budget friendly type stuff. I think kind of fits per se. But yeah, if it was just too controversial to in the future or now, I wouldn't mind even striking the whole thing, because I think C6 pretty much covers what we really want to say.
Thank you. Co-Chair Ajay?
Yeah, I just want to be clear that I'm fine with the language as is, and I'm fine with keeping it as is. It was kind of maybe more of like a curiosity for me. But I think it's worthwhile to know that, you know, if another bureau is charging, that, you know, that they can get that covered. And so I would be fine with leaving it. But, you know, thinking about like, maybe it's something that might come up in the future or something.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Let me ask the question. Oh, Commissioner Monica?
Yeah, I also wonder if there may be somebody we could ask that knows the answer to that, or somebody in our current system that we could ask whether this is language that would be useful to them. Has this ever come up for them? And if this is something that they recommend that we keep, or that it may be redundant. So it could be something that we could pursue a little bit more that way.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Okay, I'm gonna ask for C7. I'm gonna ask about the removal part that's highlighted. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was and remove the statement as the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was and remove the highlight section as was proposed? Okay, thank you. Can we move on to the next one? C8.
Okay. C8. The Oversight Board shall establish a standard by which the PPB reports to the board, including required aggregated information, e.g. Use of force cases, and frequency, for example, monthly, quarterly, or annually. To be forward-looking, these are two separate ideas, or this is one idea of the Bureau at some regular interval reporting to the new board. So there's the data that they have to be able to conduct their work. In the next phase of work, there's going to be the board making reports that are available to the public, to the government, to the public. So those are kind of two separate ideas. I just think from other cities, they have similar where the board will direct, the bureaus or the police organizations will directly send over information that the board can use.
Yes, Commissioner Catherine.
So I think it might be important to say a standard by which the PPB reports data to the board. The way it's currently written, it almost suggests that the board, that PPB would be reporting to the board as a, you know, kind of a accountability issue, which of course it is, but I don't think that's what this is trying to get to. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Was there any more discussion or question about C8? No? Okay, then I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on to section D?
I am happy to do that. I can only see one person.
And congratulations, you have a section C. Now section D, data.
D is for data or data. D1, if the board requests medical information of any individual in an investigation, the requested information shall be limited to the scope of the complaint. All requests shall comply with federal HIPAA, you almost got me there, HIPAA laws, as well as state laws. So, and you heard I'm proposing to change the shoulds to shall, and I think my co-chair would agree with that.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Are there questions or suggestions or comments about D1? No, then.
No question. There's another should in the second sentence.
Okay, okay. Oh, you're right. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from the proposed to what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was at the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move to? Yes, go ahead.
Well, before you ask if we can move on, I just want to appreciate Commissioner Ariana Bauer is using several different hand gestures today. And no, but did we have did anybody have a discussion point on this? Would you open that up for that? Facilitator Lara, you did?
Yes, I did. I asked if they have questions or suggestions or discussions.
Okay, thanks. Then I agree to move on. Therefore, go ask that question.
Okay, can we move on to D2? Okay, thank you.
Okay, D2. The board shall be provided with means of safely securing both physical and electronic information during its consideration of complaints. Electronic access to sensitive materials should have security or encryption that abides by city, state, and federal standards. The members of the board will abide by the applicable retention schedule set for sensitive information acquired throughout the course of investigation, as well as after investigation has been completed.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is there any discussion or suggestions or questions about D2? Okay, I don't know, subcommittee commissioners. Can we move on to D3? Okay, thank you.
Okay, D3 is on the screen. Information given to the board, : the board will become the custodian of information given directly to the oversight board by external sources such as volunteer testimony and electronic information, and will set their own retention schedule for safe disposal of the information. So before we get into the longer discussion, the next section is about other information that wasn't information given directly to the board. So we'll get to that. So that's D.
Okay, thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Is there any discussion, question, or suggestions about D3? Can we move on to D4? Thank you. Let's go to D4.
D4.
Apologies, this is Commissioner
yes.
Simab. I actually had a
Okay.
question.
Sure, sorry, I forgot.
Yeah.
I thought you were approving. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. Just asking for clarification feedback. I know that there are rules regarding retention of records, public records particularly. How does this impact that or affect that or controls? Does it change any controls within city code for retention of public records?
But that's an excellent question. I wonder if we should say they'll set their own retention schedules for safe disposal of the information based on state and city laws.
And I agree with that's a great question, Commissioner Simab and Dan. I agree with that. It should be based on whatever the city proposes for all records, and definitely, as we'll see in the next section, to safely and appropriately fulfill complaint to the end.
Thank you, Commissioner Simab and Co-Chair Dan and Ovi. Is there an additional discussion or question for D3? Then let me ask, is there a strong opposition to changing from as it was to the proposed changes? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed changing? Thank you. Can we move on? Okay, let's go to D4.
Okay, D4, other information, : information that the board acquires from external media sources, in parentheses, uploaded videos, images, social media, in parentheses, that has not discreetly been given by the owner will be treated as public records with the understanding that the board does not own or have the ability to grant further publication rights to media not generated by the city or obtained through the above mentioned process.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is there discussion or questions about D4? Okay, can we move on to E? Okay, before we continue with the next, and congratulations to finish D. Before continuing to E, we're gonna take a very short break. It's 7:39 and we will come back at 7:45. Thank you. We'll continue reviewing the document on and start with E. Thank you.
Well, I guess it's my turn, but I haven't turned my camera back on yet. Okay. So E, all right, so there's a preface in this section, which we haven't run into yet in this document, I think. So E is body camera footage, And it says the Police Accountability Commission is aware that the city has not, well, maybe we should put the date in there, has not, as of January 2023, currently implemented police body cameras, but anticipates that the city will have fully implemented or be close to fully implementing police body cameras by the time the oversight begins its work. And then E1, I'm good then. So that's just, I hope we can accept the preface, but I'm just going to read E1 as well. The Oversight Board shall have automatic access to all body camera video footage without having to request it separately.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Is there any discussion, questions, or comment about the intro and E1? Yes, Commissioner Connie?
Should we put something in there if it isn't put in place in time? Or should we just assume that it will be?
Is there any other co-chairs would like to answer? Or do you have any suggestions?
I guess I'm gonna quickly thank you, Commissioner Conley, for the question. I was wondering if I could ask staff if there is a deadline for when those discussions about body cameras would end up being, if there's a deadline for the city and for the police to get that implemented or not.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Staff?
Yeah, there are deadlines under the settlement agreement, and to the best of my knowledge, the city is past some of them. But and I seen Co-Chair Dan nodding along to that. I think my understanding is that the city is in bargaining with the PPA about it, and that bargaining, no information is being shared with people outside of it. So I don't know anything else about it besides that it's happening. And we could ask city attorney's office for more information there. However, the fact that it's in the settlement agreement and has deadlines does mean that at some point in the future, it is seems as though it would be a safe assumption that the city will have body cams. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Co-Chair Dan?
Well, yes, thank you, staff, because I believe that the agreement said that the body cameras would be in place by October of last year. At the last hearing in front of Judge Simon, the city said that they have 13 different mediations with the police association to work this out, and to my knowledge, they haven't done that yet. But it's likely that the board that we're designing will not actually be in place and running with a full staff and investigating cases until late 2024 or early 2025, which is like almost 2 years from now. So I think that we're safe putting this work in here. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Monica?
Yeah, one more thing. I did a good bit of research on this section, and Portland Police Bureau had a presentation to the city that included their timeline, and their timeline, and I'll put it under quotations from what they wrote, hopes to begin contract negotiations for full implementation and hopes to have a system fully in place by the end of 2023. So that's straight from the Portland Police Bureau.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Co-Chair Aye?
So I was just wondering that language about without having to request it separately from what exactly?
Okay, exactly. That's your suggestion, to say request it?
It was a question.
Yeah, I think I see what you're getting at. I think you should probably say without having to make a special request for it. What we mean. Is that right, Co-Chair? Having to make a special.
I think that's fair, and I think it'll make more sense in just a little bit when we kind of talk about the next half of the section. Yeah. Something.
And we'll get rid of separately. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's there any additional suggestions or discussion or questions about E1? Okay. Let me ask, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed changes for E1? Thank you. Can we move on to E2? Okay, let's move on to E2.
E2. The oversight board shall have immediate access to all body camera footage.
Is there any suggestions or questions, comments about E2? Okay, then can we move? Oh, yes, Co-Chair Christian?
Hi, thanks. Could someone explain how this is different from the one above? I feel like I'm just can't understand.
I'll take that. Yeah, that, agreed. They sound very, very similar, but automatic kind of is a term of like skipping over any hurdle to like request to get that done. And automatic might change depending on whatever vendor is used and where the information is stored. In regards to body cameras, immediate is the sense that like once it is available, the board should have access to it because of the immediate or because of the acute nature of some of the investigations that they do. I guess the example would be in the use of deadly force cases or death in custody cases. Reviews are, as mentioned in compelled testimony earlier, reviews are hopefully done within the first 48 hours. So even though like someone could have automatic access to it when it's available, it's automatic, like when available could be a while. Like we want the board to have immediate access so it can help them further improve their investigations and initial discussions with bureau members. I'm going to type it.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Co-Chair Aji?
Yeah, I guess I was wondering, maybe this is a question about E1 and E2, but what in terms of automatic and immediate access, does that mean like having like access specifically to like storage, like having, for example, like body cams like automatically upgrade to a cloud? Like what, I guess it's not clear for me. I'm having trouble knowing if it's still going to rely on police turning something over or whether it's actually going to be like housed in, you know, like on our servers or like in our cloud storage. Yeah, I don't know if and maybe this is more of a curiosity because I think again this language is fine and I'm totally fine for this language, but yeah, I guess I have a question around that.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely not a curiosity. It's a great question, and we had the same exact ones when we discussed it. There is like way too much data to be held in like Portland's current systems, so likely it will be held by the vendors. Yeah, possibly Axon, like the vendors who are going to be kind of running or selling the body camera infrastructure to the city. Later on, we kind of discussed that same issue. It's like, oh, do you want to have to go through the PPP to then get to the videos? But direct access is what we'd want, and that will be the discussion. Like whoever owns it, whoever owns the footage, or whoever owns or has the storage to it, how directly does the board contact or get in touch with them to get the information they need? And that's still kind of under discussion and can't really be 100% stated because body cameras don't exist yet, but that'll be part of later the proposal too. But that's like a fantastic question and something that we look into as well.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Commissioner Sima?
Yeah, also another thing that's taking place is that they have not negotiated IT contracts with the city yet, depending on who whether it's going to be Axon or whatever the winning bid is. Apologies if that has happened already, I don't know, but I know for sure that IT negotiations is still something that's taking place, and it's not certain whether the contractor that's supplying the body cams as Commissioner Obi said, would it be them or would it be us? But yes, the city is also not fully capable of taking on its own portal system, and it's part of the big benefit that a lot of these body cam companies sell and offer as far as how to be able to maintain the data in the portal structure.
Thank you, Commissioner Sima. Co-Chair Dan?
Yeah, so just so you know, there's some aspirational language we're going to send to the city about who owns it and how you get access to it that we'll get to when we're finished with the actual numbered portion of this section E. So we'll cut back to that discussion, I'm sure. But one of the reasons these two things are in here is that in New York City, they contracted with the vendor, and then the vendor and then the police department there didn't check the little box that said the CCRB, which is the New York's review board, will can have access to this immediately. So we just want to make sure that it's written into the code and that the city is aware that they should check that box. It's a very easy thing. It's just like one little check box, and it's caused a lot of problems for the New York Oversight Board.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Okay, then if there's no discussions, I'm gonna ask, is there any suggested changes either? Okay, Commissioner Sima?
I do want to say that there is, I've had the privilege to be able to see how data within our criminal legal system and its partners, whether it's through Multnomah County, Oregon Judicial Courts, or even within Portland Police Bureau, how policing data, inmate traffic, and bookings have been shared. And so a lot of there's like cross-portal access, almost API style. So so I don't see like access ever necessarily being a big barrier for us. It's just like whether it'll take a few days or a week or something like that. It could be to be able to gain information that we need, plus or minus. So that's something to keep in mind for all of us.
Thank you, Commissioner Sima. Is there any discussion or changes to E2? Okay, so we move on to E3. Thank you. E3.
Oh, this is mine, I think, yes. This is all recorded footage of every event that comes to the Oversight Board for review shall be available in full without any editing or tampering.
Is there any discussion or question about E3? Can we move on to E4?
I think
Co-Chair. Co-Chair Ajay, thank you.
I was just wondering if and maybe you include language in this later, but if we can also include language that says and is verified for authenticity. Just because, there's deep fakes and AI and all sorts of things.
Okay, where did you suggest adding this words?
Comes to the Oversight Board for review. So, yeah, maybe just adding to the end and will be verified for authenticity. Maybe someone else has a better, more artful way of.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. Co-Chair Dan?
Yeah, well, it's probably okay to put it here. I mean, this section is specifically about body camera footage. I wonder, we didn't say that in the external sources that they're going to be getting, like when they find video online or anything like that. So to me, that's kind of an investigative question and not an access information question. But I'm not opposed to adding that language here, or thinking about going back and adding it above if people want to.
Yeah, I mean, if it's for body cam footage, then we can take it out, but maybe we could also add to that section, like all body cam footage. Because when I see like all recorded footage, I assume it was not just body cam, but I don't know.
Thank you. Commissioner Sima?
Yeah, I actually like what Commissioner Amici brought up, and it made me even think that even making sure that we get unedited, unaltered forms of this stuff, even though, you know, hopefully we have direct portal access, but still, you know, unless that language is in there somewhere. I don't really have.
Thank you, Commissioner Sima. Co-Chair Obi?
No, I just wanted to agree with the previous three commissioners. Adding it to section D when we make another, or adding section D when we refer to external sources would be a good idea about verifying footage. But yeah, it is an investigative thing, but it definitely makes sense to just like restate it here.
Okay, thank you. Then let me ask this question, and there's not suggestions or additional.
So staff, can you put that suggested end clause back into E3? And then can we look above back to D and insert that as my co-chair suggested? I don't know if you still have it.
Yeah, it's and will be verified for authenticity, if I recall correctly. Assuming that's, if I could ask a clarifying question, verified by the oversight board?
Is that what you meant, Commissioner Amici?
I mean, the thing is that like the likelihood of the oversight board having those specific skills is unlikely, you know, so it feels like a contractor or, you know, some kind of, like there are people and services and academics and all sorts of folks who verify media for authenticity. And yeah, I think it'll have to be one of those contracted out things, not necessarily, yeah, if that makes any sense.
Just to follow up on that question, the sort of working consensus of the commission in this phase of work so far has been to use the board to mean the board as well as its potential contractors or staff or anything like that. So to clarify the previous question, board as opposed to PPB or the body camera vendor. And I'm seeing a nod, so thank you for clarifying. And would you prefer that to be in the text then?
In the top, wait, in D, is that what you're saying, or here?
Either, both. I'm just clarifying, sorry.
I mean, I don't think we need that and will verify for authenticity for the body cam stuff, but if other folks, like, I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah, thank you.
So the section I think in question for where else to put that is D4.
Is there any suggestion, or can we approve E3 and then move on? Yes, Commissioner Sophia. I thought you raised your hand. I cannot see everyone now, but is Commissioner Sophia wanted to say something?
Yes, just a thought, kind of along these lines, that I know I haven't seen it, but maybe it's implicitly in there, that there's this clause of preservation of information when an incident happens. I know that information can be erased, like conveniently. And I wondered if we had any clauses in there that kind of covered that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Co-Chair Obi?
Yeah, awesome question, Commissioner Sophia. Yeah, it kind of is in two separate places. One is saying that in the first two, like E1 and E2, it kind of means having access to all the footage without any sort of interference. And later on in the request section of this portion, it states that the retention schedule for body camera should mirror the availability to make a complaint. So that would kind of also say all that video evidence, or yeah, whether protected or not, should be able to be available as a complaint or till the end of the complaint. So I guess, maybe we didn't discreetly write it enough, but yeah, it means like the board should have access to all the video until the complaint is completely ended and mirrors a retention schedule set by the city.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. And if we can, Co-Chair Ovi and Co-Chair Dan, can we approve E3 and then move to D4, or you want to add some changes to E3?
I just wanted to also, just to follow up on this conversation, say that, and it says without any editing or tampering, I think that covers deleting it, right? Editing, tampering, deleting it is a form of tampering.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask for E3. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Is there general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Thank you. Now we can either move on. Can we move on either to D4 or the next one? Or this was the last one? I don't know. Okay, we can go to D4 and that way we can review it. Okay. Is there a suggestions or comments about, okay. Is there any additional changing to D4 or can we ask the questions about D4? Okay, yes, Co-Chair Dan?
Yeah, I would just say, instead of having an and, it should just say, period, such information will be verified for authenticity.
Thank you. Is there an additional suggestions or questions? No? Okay, let me ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? We're talking about D4. Okay, thank you. And I guess, can we move on? I don't know if we finish or there's more.
There is more.
The final section, and we'll kind of.
Oh, yes. Thank you. And Commissioner Sophia, do you have a comment? Or you were just agreeing? Okay, thank you. Then we move on.
I'll read this section just so it kind of gets into what we're saying. So the PAC, having evaluated body camera structures and proposals, agrees that the following items are necessary to ensure the Community Police Oversight Board's success. The PAC's mandate from the City Council does not include addressing these items. Nonetheless, these proposals support the Oversight Board's ability to fulfill its mandate. Number one, the Oversight Board should be the owners of the body camera footage and ensure the Bureau has access to footage, and ensure that the Bureau has access to footage, or access to view footage.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is there any discussion or changes or question about this information that is on camera? Yes, staff?
Yeah, if I could request of co-chairs, do you think it might make sense to go through all three of these items before circling back and talking about each one individually? They are kind of all parts of a whole.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
So yeah, let me read that in the bullet point. I'll skip the notes. So if the Oversight Board is unable to be the owner of the body camera footage, at a minimum, the board should be co-owners with the Bureau, and digital access to body camera footage will always be turned on for the board and its staff. I can do this to number two. The retention schedule should at least, or should be at least as long as the timeline to make and resolve a complaint and resolve any civil action. I would just ready to change the retention schedule of body camera footage. That wasn't clear, but we don't have to definitely do that. And then number three, the police officers involved in the incident should write their report, or have given a full and thorough, I think there's a word missing, but have given a full and thorough statement about the incident or event before viewing the video footage.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is there questions or discussion or suggestions about this number 3, 1, 2, and 3? Yes, Co-Chair Obi.
Just from relative to point number 1, we'll have to see how the negotiations end up in regards to body camera footage. It might not be possible to be the owners or have co-ownership. We'll have to discuss that with the city attorney, but that was just like a reasonable point, saying a way to ensure that footage is not tampered with and available to the board immediately. Being owners is a strong but reasonable way of doing it. That's just something to consider in the future and as these things develop.
Thank you. Commissioner Catherine?
So I guess I just want to understand the justification for point number 3. It seems like point number 1 and 2 are pretty straightforward, and I shouldn't be that controversial. My understanding is point number 3 is really why we have had 13 or whatever number of negotiation sessions between the city and the union, because I guess I've just come to understand that this is the big sticking point, or one of them. So I guess it seems to me to be a politically significant thing for us to weigh in on this. And I guess I'm just wondering, I personally agree with this position, just wondering what the case is for this commission to weigh in on this issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. And Co-Chair Dan?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Now, I can't remember if it was in our subcommittee meeting for access to information or in this setting that we heard from Jared Hager from the U.S. Department of Justice. Sorry, I don't want to use all those acronyms. And he told us about how the officers who are involved in deadly force incidents don't have to write reports. Instead, they have to give a full and thorough statement about the incident. So that's why they have that "or" clause in there. And I think, unless I'm wrong, I think there's kind of full agreement, but maybe we're seeking that right now from the commission. That let me say, go back to the original discussion about this, that the Supreme Court ruling that guides police use of force says that the police officer has to be basing their decision to use force on what they knew at the time, not on 20/20 hindsight. So I can't even understand why there's an argument made that they're allowed to view that footage before they write a report or give a statement, because that would mean that they're basing their statement on 20/20 hindsight in the form of just video footage. So it may be controversial to the people who are arguing for the officers to be able to look at the footage, but in general, and especially from a legal standpoint, Counselor, I think it shouldn't be controversial at all. It should just be, we're stating something that is consistent with the Graham versus Connor decision that I'm talking about.
Thank you. And what I'm gonna go one by one to see if we can approve it or move on or make changes. I'm gonna ask about number 1. Is there any discussion of specific changes or suggestions? Yes, Co-Chair Dan?
Well, just so that we're going into this with our eyes wide open, so to speak, we're not sure. Co-Chair Ugoji and I are not sure that you can share ownership of public records like that, but we're putting it in there as a suggestion, just sort of so that the people who make those decisions will see what we're getting at. And second of all, the real complicated part about the question of ownership is that, as I said before, this board probably won't be up and running until late 2024, early 2025. And if body cameras are implemented before then, somebody has to be the steward of that footage until there's a staff, and that staff includes an IT department that runs the body camera footage program. So this also is just something we want to put in the, in the city council's to-do list, so that might be considered, whatever they do between now and then might be considered temporary until the board exists. Does that make sense? Am I saying, okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. And the staff make a comment about this other phase, but let me ask, is there any suggestions, changes to number 1? If not, can we move on to number 2? Okay, then let's move to number 2. We have changes here, but I will ask if there are any suggestions or additional changes to number 2. No? Then I'm gonna ask the questions. Is there a strong opposition to changing from as it was to the proposed changes? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Thank you. Okay, can we move on to number 3? Thank you. There is also change, but before I ask the question, is there any discussion or suggestions on number 3? Commissioner Catherine?
So just following up on my previous question, I wonder if there is some ability to point to other jurisdictions that have adopted this, as a best practice, so that in terms of this, from the standpoint of accountability, we can point to this as a best practice for ensuring accountability.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Now, Commissioner Debbie.
So I'm going to ask Commissioner Handelman to correct me if I'm wrong, but my memory is that the Department of Justice, when they are saying this is the policy the city should follow, was saying it's kind of a best practice. So, but again, I'm going to ask, I have the memo somewhere in my computer, but I can't pull it out of thin air right now. So, so Commissioner Handelman, can you clear that up or elaborate?
Well, I'd rather not. No, I mean, I'm making a little joke. I was going to say I'd rather not, because the enforcement arm of the U.S. Department of Justice does not follow this. So the Civil Rights Department, which is the one that has entered into the settlement agreement with the city, is being very adamant that this be what the rule is. And in fact, they've stated that if the city comes forward with a proposal that this doesn't happen, and that they may take legal action to force them to make this what happens. So it's in terms of best practices, this is one of the reasons that I didn't like the term best practice when we've been using it all along. That it's a good practice. It's something that we want to have happen here, and you can find some cities that do this. I'm trying to find there's a scorecard somewhere on the internet that lists which cities have which of the best, the best recommended practices by legal experts, and this is one of those recommended ones. But a lot of cities have the red dot instead of a green dot for this item. I'll see if I can find that. I guess my next suggestion about this, though, about this whole section, was that I was hoping that maybe we could forward, all these other documents are going to be folded into the stuff that we're going to do in the later phases. But because these negotiations are going on now, if we agree to these points, I'd like to suggest that we think about forwarding to the City Council these 3 points while they're still in negotiations. So, I guess we'll come back to that after we resolve the question of what this section says. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach Dan. Commissioner Monica?
I actually am looking at the scorecard right now because it was part of my research. And the only police department that has this access, even though there's a very large group of civil rights organizations that support this and think that this is the right thing to do. There's only one, and it is Cincinnati Police Department that is actually doing this right now. So not asking the police officers to write the report before they get to see the video footage.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica.
Well, I think in the spirit of like our footnoting, if we could footnote the Department of Justice position and the Cincinnati experience, those both seem like pretty helpful pieces of support for this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Staff, are you adding the footnotes or this?
Yeah, it's in the comments, and so the three different things that were mentioned here: the DOJ citation, the other jurisdictions, which is to say Cincinnati, and then if I could ask Co-Chair Dan, what was the name of that court case that you mentioned again?
Graham versus Connor, and CONNOR, I believe. Graham like the cracker.
Yep. So yeah, those are all noted, and we'd add that in the same way all the other footnote references are in there.
Thank you. Thank you, Steph. Then I want to ask the question if we can move on. Oh, Commissioner Monica?
Yeah, two more jurisdictions. I didn't scroll down further. Las Vegas and Parker, Colorado.
Thank you. They will add it to the footnotes. Adding all these comments to the footnotes, can we move on to the next? Yes, Commissioner Monica?
And Washington, D.C.
And Washington, D.C. Okay, thank you. No, it's good. You did this research and you worked so hard for it. You should mention it. Thank you. Very well appreciated. Okay. Can we move on to the next? Yes, do I see some hands and nodding? Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Yay, congratulations. Okay, let's go to a screen share slide 17. The commission has completed discussion on the document, and next on the agenda is discussing whether the commission should approve the draft areas of agreement with all the changes we have made today incorporated into the text. There is potential agreement document that was circulated that gives some context as to this decision. Before seeing if there are consensus around approving these documents, we're going to hear from the public. After that, we will review the PAC values and goals. Finally, we'll ask if members want to make any final tweaks, and then ask if they are ready to make a decision. We go to slide 18. We ask members of the
Victoria, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Commissioner Dan has had his hand up.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Moses. Co-chair Dan?
Well, I'm just wondering, are we going to have, as part of the discussion of adopting the whole document, taking that last section, as I suggested, and sending it to City Council? Because we haven't done that with anything yet except for our reports. But just in terms of timeliness, I'm just wondering what people thought about that, or if we should do that as part of the discussion of adopting the whole document.
And let me send it to staff for that.
Yeah. There's two ways to do this. It could be a separate question after the approval of the document, or alternatively, if there's consensus around it, then perhaps it could be essentially a friendly amendment to the proposal to adopt this document from the subcommittee. Part of the package of approving a document is usually that it's published and typos can be fixed and things like that. So is there any opposition to the idea that as part of the approval of this document, which you'll be asked to do in a few minutes, that it would also include this later portion being sent to the relevant parts of the city that are involved in the bargaining process? Is there any objection to that? Is there a general agreement to do that as part of the same? Okay, great. Thank you. I'll pass it back over to Facilitator Victoria.
Thank you, staff. Now, we ask members of, we're gonna go to public comment. We ask members of the public to keep their comments to 2 minutes in length and keep their comments focused on the draft document. You can raise your hand and Zoom when you like to be called on. Members of the public, now is your time to comment about the document. I don't see anyone. No. Okay. Then we will now briefly look at the PAC values and goals as a reference for this document. On March 24, the PAC adopted values and goals, and as a part of the decision, the PAC agreed to use the PAC values and goals as a reference point for future PAC decisions to ensure that all future decisions align with the values and goals. Please briefly share slide 19, thank you. Then staff will take over screen share. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is something that the PAC briefly did at the end of the fact-finding phase. It was sort of envisioned more for the, at the time in March as for the more forward-looking things. And so this is actually the first document in which that fully applies, that every decision that the PAC would make would align with the values and goals. The values and goals has this introductory part, then there's a list of the 6. This list is mirrored in the leftmost column you're about to see. So for each of these goals, there are the, each of these values, there are related at least one, sometimes more than one goal. And I'll just let you see probably 2 of these at a time because a couple of them get pretty long. Just quickly review them. And the question that the commission agreed to ask yourselves at this stage is the things, are the things that are in the areas of agreement on access to information in alignment with the values and goals, and in particular, the success criteria considerations column, which is the far right column. And if not, this review offers you the opportunity to find a way to make that work and to adjust if needed to allow for that. So I'm just gonna do 2 at a time and scroll in just a moment here. Go down to harm reduction. Unfortunately, with this PDF, it's a little hard to show only to get rid of this empty space in the middle here. Thank you all. If there's anything anyone would like me to scroll up or down, please say so now. And the link is also available in the chat.
Thank you, staff. And let me ask, will any of the members of the commission like to revisit any portion of the draft areas of agreement? Commissioner Aji?
One thing that came to mind was the public having access, like, you know, body camera footage being released to the public, because it brought to mind the fact that oftentimes we see, like in the media, family and, you know, civil rights activists will be calling on the police to release body camera footage and to see what the incident is, and there's some kind of delay. And I don't know if that's really anything do about that. I guess I was curious about the public's relationship to that data, and whether the commission could potentially be a source of that information to the public.
Thank you, Commissioner and Co-Chair Aji. I will pass it to Co-Chair Obi.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think part of that's going to be in the next phase, in regards to like the kind of the public data distribution from the actual board. And then, yeah, that's a very good question, because we'll have to see where the ownership lies, because it kind of written in our own statements in D, which will relate to E as well. But like confidential data that isn't necessarily ours needs to be stewarded in a way that it remains confidential or remains, you know, protected of the owners, or for the owners. So I think that is, I guess, further to be decided, but it'll probably be broached next month, or like as the next phase gets started, in regards to like how the board will be circulating its own reports and possibly camera footage.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is there any additional questions or suggestions? Or review of the document? And if you are ready, I can ask, is there any strong opposition to approving the draft areas of agreement with all the changes we have made today incorporated into the text as the Police Accountability Commission areas of agreement on access to information? Okay. Is there a general agreement around approving this document? Congratulations. The document of areas of agreement on access and information is approved. Good job. Congratulations. Then we can move to the next item on the agenda.
Victoria, Commissioner Dan has his hand
Oh,
up.
yes, Commissioner Dan,
Right.
sorry.
I didn't propose the other thing as a amendment to this, so I wanted to do that first, and I'm very excited. I hope my co-chair joins me in being very excited that we have finished our first document saying what the new board is going to do. Woohoo! That's very exciting. So I'm going to go back to my question that I asked before, which is, how does the commission feel about taking this last three paragraphs that we're asking the city council to consider and sending them forward to city council now while this body camera discussion is still underway, so that it's not, you know, we're not doing it after the cows are out of the barn, so to speak.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. And we're gonna take a break, but before that, I will pass it to the staff.
Yep, my understanding is that the commission just agreed to do that by previously agreeing to make that a part of the package to approve, and then by just now approving the document. Is there any question or concern with that interpretation of what we've done so far today? Okay, so then yes, to answer your question directly, Co-Chair Dan, yes. And while I have the floor, I just wanted to thank Co-Chairs Dan and Obi, because now your role as co-chairs, you've fulfilled everything with relation to that for access to information. So thank you for that. I'll pass it back over to Victoria.
Thank you, staff. Commissioner Catherine?
Yeah, so I do support forwarding that information on. I guess my question is whether it should be forwarded on to to everyone involved in those negotiations, or everybody involved in the Department of Justice, compliance agreement, which is what are the stakeholders with whom we've been charged to confer with. So I'm not sure the answer to that, but I guess I just want to raise that to see whether we should be more inclusive in terms of our distribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Okay, it's 8:36. We will take a short break and come back at 8:42. Thank you. Thank you. We're now going to start discussing the draft of PAC areas of agreement on structural oversight, which the subcommittee referred to the commission on January 23rd. I'll now pass it to the co-chairs, Faith and Debbie, to explain the document. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm gonna be explaining tonight to give Co-Chair Debbie a break. She will be taking the lion's share the next time. So my name is Faith Aiken. I use she, her pronouns. I've been a co-chair along with Debbie Iona on the subcommittee of structural oversight. We want to express our gratitude to the subcommittee members, Sophia, Angie, and Ajay, for their help and participation. So, oh, and Casey, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm sorry, Casey. I am aware of the time, so I'm gonna read and see how far we get. So I will get on going. The Oversight Board, or the board, shall have the authority to make recommendations to the Portland Police Bureau and City Council on Bureau policies, practices, directives, and training. To facilitate this work, the Oversight Board shall have staff dedicated to policy work. This document outlines how policy recommendations are initiated, presented, adopted, and implemented. The public will have the opportunity to comment on all policy recommendations during development and before adoption. We won't have time this evening to discuss or make edits, and staff will pass out the document to the rest of the commission, but we did want to give you an overview of what to expect. So I'll just quickly go over kind of the high level, and we will go into further discussion at our subsequent meeting. So the document is organized into the different phases of policy recommendations. So in the beginning is the initiation of policy, of how you make a policy recommendation and what the process is. So A1 outlines what a policy recommendation should contain. A2 is the scope of the authority in formulating policy recommendations. So what the board has authority to do. And moving down in section B, policy recommendations may be initiated through at least 6 different processes. The board may also identify additional entry points. So these are the 6 entry points we've listed. A board member may make a proposal, a community member may make a proposal. There may be agency policy review initiated through an auditing process. There may be a systemic finding in misconduct cases. There may be a review of undesirable police-related incidents or a sentinel event review. And B6, a directive review. There is some language here that we have flagged that the subcommittee referred this document to 4 sections being unfinished, and we will allude to those when the document is completely sent out. Section C, the process for board approval of policy recommendations. So how the board decides if they will move forward with a proposed policy recommendation, what the presentation of policy recommendations will look like, adoption and rescission of a policy recommendation, communication of approved policy recommendations, implementation of our policy recommendations, the required response from PPB to a policy recommendation, City Council's consideration of policy recommendations, follow up on the implementation, and then collective bargaining, PPB budget review, oversight of accountability systems, so review of deadly force investigations, and continual improvement. Finally, board proposals related to federal and state law. And then our appendix. So that is a very high level overview. I think it's 6 pages where we will be deciding on these sections at a later date.
Thank you, Co-Chair Faith. Thank you for the document and all the work you and Co-Chair Debbie and the rest of the subcommittee did for this document. Yes, Co-Chair Debbie?
So the Samir will send this out to all of you so you can take a look, and if you have any suggestions you want to make before our next meeting, feel free. Otherwise, as Co-Chair Faith pointed out, we will be going through this carefully at an upcoming meeting.
Thank you, Co-Chair Debbie. And now we'll pass it to staff.
Yeah, just to clarify, so there are 4 items there. As you go through it, you'll see in the comments there in bold that there are 4 flagged for City Attorney's Office review, but there are also several other comments that came up in the subcommittee that or subsequently that have already been added, and yours could do that too. It is likely that this commission will have 2 additional public meetings this phase of work, in which to resolve this document, as well as the officer accountability document, which is significantly longer at present. So it would be really helpful if the full commission could read and become very familiar with this document, and also suggest any proposed changes in advance, because that would allow for time management in the next 2 meetings, which are going to be the 6th and 9th of February. To get through these 2 documents. And again, this one ideally would be done in less than 1 meeting, because the other document is much longer and will need 1 plus a portion of the first of those 2 meetings. So just to kind of clarify that. And then as whenever we receive guidance on these detailed legal questions on City Attorney's Office flags that you see in the comments, there'll be information sent out to update the members as well, so you can add that to your considerations. Yeah, I'll pass it back.
Thank you, staff. Co-Chair Debbie?
I just wanted to say that if we can't get both of these done in 2 full commission meetings, I hope that we'll be able to consider at least devoting part, if not all, of a subsequent meeting. Because I don't want to shortchange any of these things. That getting the powers and duties right is really important. And I don't want to stop before we feel like we're really done. Thanks for letting me comment on that.
Yeah, I should say there are 2 current public meetings of the full commission scheduled. They're tentative right now, but they're going to get locked in for February 6th and 9th, just so everybody knows. And beyond that, more could be scheduled. That takes away time from the overall ability to meet the commission's deadlines. So It's not an absolute yes or an absolute no. Just wanted to flag that. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Then, since we're not discussing these documents, we want to go to the next item in the agenda that is public comment. That's what I think. Let's see. It will be public comment. And we ask, this is the moment for the public that can make any comments about the materials that were discussed at the meetings, or also share their stories. And we invite the public to comment and participate. You can raise your hand. Okay.
I don't see any hands raised, Victoria.
Thank you, Dr. Moses.
Mhm.
Then we go to the next item on the agenda. And I have, okay. Then on the next item on the agenda is member curiosities.
Yeah.
And I will pass it, member curiosities, I will pass it to the co-chairs.
Cool. Thank you, Victoria. I can take this. Member curiosities is a brief period of time on today's agenda and most agendas where members of the commission can bring items to discuss. This can be pretty much anything, questions, follow-ups, anything you want to share, articles. We won't vote on anything during this time, and please keep your whatever you're sharing or talking point to 1 minute per person at most. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Christian, and I will pass it to Commissioner Catherine.
Thank you. I just wanted to loop back to the question that we discussed before the last break, which is who we are sending the recommendations on the body camera recommendations to, and whether we will be sending in to entities in addition to City Council. And Commissioner Dan in the chat suggested PPA, Mental Health Alliance, Albina Ministries, the city, and the Department of Justice. And that seemed like a good list to me. So I'm not quite sure procedurally how to move that forward, but that is exactly what I was thinking, that we would send it to the group of people who are really key stakeholders in our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will pass it to Commissioner and Co-Chair Fate.
Thank you. I just came across a very interesting article done by colleagues around the prevalence of folks with mental illness and intellectual disabilities transitioning out of state institutions and the prevalence of interacting with law enforcement. And I wanted to ask permission before I send that article to all of you in email. We don't often just send each other articles. So saying it out loud and letting you know I'm going to send you that. There's a really interesting read, particularly prescient to understand the mental health community and the disabled community. So I'm going to send that article by email.
Thank you, Commissioner Fate. Commissioner Aje?
Yeah, I asked that question earlier. Yeah, and I'm trying to, it's funny because I'm kind of blanking out. So I was like hoping if someone else could remember what it was that I was in regards to the video footage. If maybe staff remembers. Thanks.
It was around distributing to the public, I think. Wasn't that what you were talking about?
Yes, the staff.
Just to speak to that, there's sort of if it's in the PAC's scope to talk about, it would fit into the reporting and transparency part of the next phase of work. which has to, this part is about how the oversight system, and in particular the board, receive information. And the next part is to includes the public. Having said that, this may also be something that is not necessarily, we'll know more by the time we're in that phase of work, but it may not end up being within the scope of the PAC because it's not necessarily known to be in the oversight board's space. And if that's the case, then it may be something that the oversight board itself needs to deal with as part of there may be directives around it. So this is a kind of a garden plot item. And as we know more about the body camera structure that the city figures out, then communicating that as they communicate that to us, that might make sense to kind of revisit whether it makes more sense in the fourth phase, or if it makes more sense as sort of something that becomes a policy recommendation for the oversight board to consider.
Thank you, staff. Now I pass it to Commissioner Fay. No? Oh, your hand is up. Okay, thank you. For the next item on, oh yeah, Commissioner Sima. You have it? No? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was also switching devices. I do want to give us a reminder based on the climate and the passing of Tyree Nichols, that we do acknowledge and are reminded about the importance of our work. You know, we've lost many names and members of our community out here. Christopher Kalonji, we can start naming, but yeah, it's a reminder of how important our work is. And I really appreciate everybody on this commission for the work that's being put together. And hopefully we're paving something that would not only prevent something like this from continuously happening, but also be a template and an example across many precincts and jurisdictions. So an appreciation and a remembrance. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sima. Very important comment. Thank you. Now I will pass it for the next item on the agenda to staff for the phases of work transition task. And yeah, please, staff.
Yeah, thank you very much. So there are a few things on the list here. There are actually 4, and some of them are going to be very quick. So on the list at the end of each phase of work, there's an opportunity for specific organizational items to be revisited if there are proposals in advance, and there'll be opportunities in the future for many of these as well. But the first item is review of proposed changes if received in advance to the PAC values and goals, which we used to review before the PAC approved the areas of agreement earlier. There were no changes received in advance. Similarly, there's an opportunity to revise the PAC community engagement framework. No, none of these were received in advance. Moving on to the structure and details phase co-chairs. This is not designed to have the PAC approve those co-chairs today, but it is a heads up that it's coming. Coming in probably 1 to 2 meetings, the opportunity for members of the commission to approve who will be the co-chairs going forward. People who have served as co-chairs before, including the current co-chairs, are eligible to have their service renewed by that approval. It could also be somebody new. Please start thinking about it and start considering if it makes sense. And if it's something you're interested in, there'll be an email that goes out asking for folks to throw their name into the hat, metaphorically, and then we can circulate that list so that members know who the options are going into the meeting in which that approval occurs. And just one additional note on this, as you are talking about subcommittees in a moment, soon after that, maybe 2 to 3 meetings from now, the full commission will also need to approve co-chairs for the subcommittees in the next phase. So as the subcommittees are determined, which is the next item on today's agenda, to talk about what those might be, start thinking about if you'd like to be a subcommittee co-chair as well, please. And again, there'll be an email that goes out about that. And then the last item on the next steps is the subcommittees. And so there's a presentation that the full commission heard last week on the proposed phase of work plan. I'll pass it over to the co-chairs, the full commission co-chairs, to talk about the topic under consideration today. And I've got slides from last week ready if it's helpful. Co-chairs, just let me know.
I think the slides would be helpful. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so just as a reminder, you know, the next phase of work, and I know it's hard when you're in the middle of talking about powers and duties, but just to kind of look ahead, there's board membership, how they're brought on, what the requirements may be, selection process, training, and also how they would be removed if needed, what the reasons would be. Then there's another section on the staff of the new board, so the agency director, staffing structure, plans on how to get from here to there, staffing, the position within the city, including the office, the budget, and where in the city's org chart the new oversight board would live. And third, there is the topic that was broached just a few minutes ago regarding public reporting and transparency. And you can see there's several things in here about this that relate not only to the work that is being done now, but other questions about public access and transparency that haven't yet been broached by the commission. And so the outcomes need to include areas of agreement that cover at least these items. Board membership, the oversight agency, including staff, office, bureau, and budget, reporting transparency and public access to information. And as a result, the discussion last week was about having, and I want to stress these are working names of the subcommittee options. The names are not necessary to get figured out today, but a subcommittee that would work on how the board's membership works, a subcommittee that would work on how the agency and staffing would work, and a subcommittee that would work on the transparency, reporting, public information would work. And each would develop a single area of agreement. For that on, this work plan may look very similar to this phase of work, and that's because it is very similar to it. So you're all very familiar, I think, with how this phase is happening. And so that's the structure there. And I'll pass it back over to co-chair Christian.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, staff, Samir. We basically covered everything I was going to say. The proposal basically is just to see if everyone approves of having this be the way that we're structuring the next phase. Like Samir said, it's basically the same as this one. So if anyone wants to tweak it at all, we can definitely discuss that. And I'll stress the same thing, which is that the names are, they can be changed later as well. Like officer accountability used to be called individual accountability or something like that. I don't remember anymore, but officer accountability changed after it had been formed on co-chair Handelman's suggestion. So that's something that can be shifted later. This is more about the structure of the next phase and the content of the subcommittees themselves, if that's how we want them organized. So I don't know if I'm allowed, do I ask now? I'll pose the question if this is cool with everyone.
And co-chair Christian, Commissioner Dan wants to say something or comment.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't see the side. Yeah, so I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I figured out a way to see almost all the faces on my screen, but it's now my slide is really small. So I've been thinking about this, and I thought I had a similar thought in the last phase, which was to put all three subcommittees together. In this case, I really think that the board and staff composition discussion should happen in the same subcommittee, and here's why. We haven't decided yet 100% whether the board itself is going to be paid or volunteer. And I think that it'll make a difference to how the staff is set up if all the board members are paid either part or full-time per the request that we're going to make. So I'd like to see those two things put together, leave the third item as is, and then recreate the community engagement subcommittee to meet not as frequently because it's no documents to try to pull out of it, but to help guide these community engagement events that have been going on and to help bring those comments that we're getting from whatever format it is back to the work groups, subcommittees, and to the full commission. Because I really think that we've sort of lost sight of that after that subcommittee stopped meeting at the end of August. And I recognize that means that one subcommittee is going to have a lot of work. It can break down into smaller work groups if need be, but that's my suggestion. Having looked at, I looked up the structure and details document, which I have in this little notebook I made many months ago, but I wasn't thinking about it until this afternoon when we had our co-chairs meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. And we don't need to do a consensus or anything, was just more about information. We need to move on for the next item on the agenda. And the next item of the agenda is the garden plot. And there is a time for facilitators, co-chairs, and staff to summarize any items already brought up today, which didn't fit into today's agenda. We'll recap those items here and use them in developing future agendas. We won't be using this time to add new items not previously mentioned or to discuss any items, but we will use this list to develop future agendas so these items can be addressed. And I want to recap if Dr. Moses has any comments for garden plot. Or maybe not. Then I will pass it to the co-chairs.
I'm so sorry. I do not have any comments for garden plot.
Thank you, Dr. Moses. I will pass it to the co-chairs if they have anything for garden plot.
Yeah, there was the thing. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go for it, Jay.
There's a thing sort of mentioned earlier about public access to information, but I think that will be, I don't know if we need to go back to that at any point, because I think that will be covered in the transparency and sort of reporting stuff. So I don't know, but I figured I would mention it.
Thank you, co-chair. Jay and co-chair Tirsa.
That's what I was going to mention. And then the other question that was raised is who will be seeing the body camera footage recommendations? Will it be city council and key stakeholders? That's it.
Thank you. Staff?
Excuse me, yeah. There are two items. One was mentioned as part of the structural oversight part of the structural oversight recommendations coming in about sort of transition plans and how to help guide implementation of board recommendations. The other, apologies, the other had to do with what Commissioner Co-Chair Jay just mentioned. So just those two things.
Thank you.
And if I could say two things really quick before you transition to the wrap up. One, just to clarify, because got a couple questions about what happened with the subcommittee conversation we just briefly had. There is clearly not consensus around the full commission approving the proposed slate of subcommittees. So as a result, it would need to be discussed by the full commission. And given that there's no time to do that today, the co-chairs are moving on from that topic. The good news is that the commission in the bylaws gave itself two ways of approving subcommittees. One is the full commission doing so. The other is the full commission co-chairs doing so. So both options remain open to the commission going forward. So that's where we're at. There's no decision made on this. And the other point will be in the chat, but there is a position, a paid position being hired by the city of Portland to help provide support for the PAC. And just want to encourage everybody watching, everybody on the call, and everyone watching to help circulate that position widely. Thanks.
Thank you, staff. Okay, we move to the next and is say thank you. Thank you to all the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. Thank you for also the interpreters, and thank you for all the members of the community for attending and contributing your thoughts and questions. And you are not already signed for email
You're on mute.
Oh yeah, you're on mute.
So you know.
Oh, I'm sorry, I say everything. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you to all the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. Thank you also to the interpreters to make this more accessible and inclusive. Finally, thank you to all the members of the community for attending and contributing with your thoughts and questions. And if you're not already signed up to email updates, please also sign up to receive updates from the PAC. I think that's all, and we can adjourn this meeting. It's 9:12 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.